Hello everyone, happy April. This is my monthly reading wrap up for the month of March, which is newly over. And by newly, I mean like 2 weeks ago it ended. A little behind the curve. It's okay, I'm busy. Okay, anyway, I read 9 books in March, so we're just gonna go through them all. Most of them are romance. It's just the way it fucking happened. I don't know, I was reading a lot from authors that I was already familiar with, who write romance, so that's what I read. Everything I read was digital. I didn't make any progress on my fucking physical TBR, which is just wonderful and amazing. Let's just talk about these goddamn books, okay? The first book that I read was called Until I Saw You by Dianna Roman. This is a book, obviously, by Dianna Roman, who wrote The Fading, and I really liked The Fading. That's an alien romance that was just so, like, silly and fun, and that I enjoyed a lot. So this is an romance, again, about a guy named Riley who is newly blind, and then a guy named Harper who Riley hires to be his aide because he is blind. Harper has some trauma where he had an abusive boyfriend, like freshly out of the relationship, hasn't even fucking moved out of their apartment. Overall, I thought this one was just kind of okay. Like, I don't really have much to say about it. It was not my favorite book ever. The romance wasn't like incredible. I gave this one 3 stars. Just okay. Would not read again. Definitely not as good as The Fading. The next book that I read was Poetry on Ice by Jessie H. Rain. This is another romance. This time, this one is Enemies to Lovers. It's about hockey players. Specifically, their names are Ant Decker and Robbie McGuire. Ant Decker is like a very grumbly, moody guy. He's a closeted gay. And then Robbie McGuire is like this much more lighthearted, like happy-go-lucky kind of guy who thinks that he's only attracted to women. So this is a gay awakening kind of book. They both play for the same hockey team and they have a big rivalry going on, but it turns out that they also have a lot of sexual tension. Okay, I'm very picky about enemies to lovers because, first of all, I think most books marketed as enemies to lovers are not enemies to lovers, right? Even in this case, this is rivals to lovers. But I think this one does a good job. Like, I think there's a really good level of like hatred in the beginning, and it turns into something that is very fluffy and sweet and domestic by the end. Which I really, really liked. My biggest complaint about this book is that I felt like there needed to be more of a buffer between them being enemies and them being lovers, because as it stood, it was just like they were enemies and they were lovers. It was like, okay. I thought it was fun. I thought it was good. I liked it. And I think hockey is a really hot sport. So I give this one 4 stars. The next book that I read was called Rent, Paid in Full, also by Jessie H. Rain. I read this because this was like, there was an advert at the end of Poetry on Ice being like, if you liked this book, you should also check out my other book, Rent, Paid in Full, which is also enemies to lovers. And I was like, okay, fuck it, I'll do it. I liked Poetry on Ice. So I decided to read it. This one is about college students. So you have Ryan, who is this nerdy kind of guy who doesn't have a lot of money, and he hates jocks, but he ends up being roomed with this really rich jockey guy named Miller. And obviously, being poor, Ryan needs money, and Miller starts offering him money in return for sexual favors. I feel like overall the plot of this one was very similar to Poetry on Ice. Like this, it's like really just the Poetry on Ice story transplanted into a college dorm, and then instead of the feminization kink, they have the like paying for sexual favors kink, I guess. So I just kind of felt like it was a worse Poetry on Ice. And I feel like maybe I would feel the opposite if I had read them in a flipped order, where I would have liked this one and I wouldn't have liked Poetry on Ice as much. Really, the big thing is that it's just a very similar story, right? This is enemies to lovers with 2 young men. One of them doesn't really know that he's gay, right? He's like trying to figure things out. Like, it was fine. I gave this one 3 stars. The next book that I read was called Loud, Accept Nothing Less Than the Life You Deserve by Drew Afualo. This is like a memoir, self-help advice kind of book from this woman named Drew Afualo. She is a TikToker. I am not familiar with her. I don't think I've ever seen one of her videos. I only knew about her because she did a podcast with Caleb Huron and Brittany Broski. So that was like my familiarity with Drew Afualo. So this book is part memoir talking about Drew Afualo's life and how it was for her growing up and how her relationship is. But really that takes a backseat to the advice, because really this is like a feminist book about like how to be yourself and how to live as a woman in a world that is actively acting against you. Overall, it was an interesting book and there's a lot of good advice in there, but I feel very similarly about it as I do the Barbie movie, where I feel like it's a very surface level view of feminism, which I think is okay. And I think there are people who need to hear that stuff. But I just feel like a lot of the time it was saying very surface level things and then not going very deep into them, or it was saying very surface level things and then just rehashing those things over and over again. And again, I think it's really important to hear those things sometimes. And I think it reached me at a time in my life where I kind of needed it, I'm gonna be honest. I'm not gonna get into it. I have shit going on in my life, okay? I always got shit going on. I'll say there's a reason my hair is pink and purple right now. So I think like ultimately the message was good. I just think that the execution maybe not so good. Again, there's a lot of repetition of like the things that she's saying, and nothing that she's saying is particularly new or deep or interesting. Like if you understand feminism, if you are a feminist, you probably know a lot of this stuff already. If you watch the Barbie movie, you probably know a lot of this stuff already. I thought it was overall pretty good, and I think there are definitely people who need to hear that. So if you feel like you need a message about like you don't need no man, you should read this book. Or if you really love Drew Afualo, then you should read this book. Otherwise, I think you can skip it. I gave that one 3 stars. The next book that I read was Human Omega, Discovered on the Slave Planet, which I have read twice before, so this is my 3rd time reading this book. Oops. Oh, sorry guys. This is by Eileen Glass, and it is the story of this guy. His name is Carter, and he gets stuck on this alien planet where he is expected to be a slave for these like bug people, but he ends up being protected by these 2 like native aliens they're the Fliofki, okay? One of them, his name is Ciel, and the other one's name is Pick. Ciel is smarter and older, and Pick is younger and like more la-di-da, you know, he's that kind of guy. And they see Carter and they're like, oh my god, that's an Omega, we have to protect this Omega. So they protect him, and then they live in happily as like a little family of slaves. I've read this book obviously before, and there's a reason why I was reading it for a 3rd time, okay? It's because I really like it. I think it's a really good book. It scratches an itch in my brain. I don't know what fucking itch it scratches, but it's scratching some kind of itch. I have described it in the past as book cocaine, which it is for me. I think there's really interesting world building in terms of the different views that Carter and the 2 Fliofki have, because Carter is like, I'm very independent, I can do everything on my own, but the Fliofki, because they think he's an Omega, are like, we have to take care of this guy, like he deserves all the treasures in the world. And he's like, Carter's like, I don't deserve any treasure. Why are you giving me treasure? It scratches an itch for me, okay? I love it a lot. 5 stars for Alien Omega, Discovered on the Slave Planet. I also read the sequel and the threequel, I guess, which are Human Omega, Trapped in the Alien Jungle, and then Human Omega, Babied by his guardian mates. You can guess what happens in both of those, okay? The sequel and the threequel are definitely not as strong as the first book. They don't scratch the same itch for me, and for that reason, they are very disappointing. I think the second one isn't bad. I think the second one is still very strong, and I gave it 4 stars. The problem with the second one, for me, is that there's a bit in the middle where the characters are kind of separated for a while, and then they are moved from the area that they were in the first book, right? They escape, I'm telling you that. And they go to a place that I think is not as interesting and not as cool and not as fun. And then Eileen Glass also uses a cheap, hacky way of being like, oh, they can all communicate with each other now. Like, they learn each other's languages. But it's again, a cheap, hacky way that I don't like. And this happens a lot in alien romance. Like, for some reason, nobody can learn anyone's language. Like, it has to be a machine that learns it for you. There's no natural processes in these books ever. I don't think Human Omega, Trapped in the Alien Jungle is bad. I gave it 4 stars. The third one I didn't love, and I'm not reading the fourth one. I just, like, The third one is where I'm ending. The third one, it's just very action heavy, and I think where Eileen Glass really excels is in her character building and in her romance building. So when you have a book that's full of action, you know, I really don't care. And then also those second two books are quite long, where the first one is like 200 pages. The second and third ones are like 400, 500 pages. And I think just too fucking long. Too long. Too shut the fuck up. It's too long, okay? I gave Human Omega Babied by his alien mates 3 stars. And I'm not continuing the series. I will probably reread the first one in the future because I love the first one. I think it scratches a fucking itch for me, okay? But I probably wouldn't reread the series as a whole again. The next book that I read, pivoting, the next book that I read was called The Last Hour of Gann by R.Lee Smith. This is a sci-fi romance novel that is basically like, this is the way I'm going to describe it, okay? So imagine, if you will, if Ice Planet Barbarians and the Left Hand of Darkness had a baby, but on the side, the Left Hand of Darkness was actually having a little tryst with a little life, okay? And so nobody really knows who the father is. And this baby, the Last Hour of Gann, is being raised collectively by Ice Planet Barbarians, a little life, and the Left Hand of Darkness. Because it's a very similar plot to Ice Planet Barbarians. The general idea is that you have this girl, her name is Amber. She is in this future dystopian Earth and is left destitute with her sister, and she feels that she has no other options. So she takes her sister and herself on this pioneer mission of this gajillionaire's like ship that he intends to take out into space to find other habitable exoplanets. However, they never make it to the planet, okay, because they fucking crash land. Okay, they crash land, and it turns out that they've crash landed on a planet full of lizard people. And one of those lizard people, his name is Morak, okay? He sees a great flame hand in the sky, okay? This is the ship flaming out of the fucking exploding. And he's like, I gotta go, because he's very religious. This is a very religious lizard people. And he's like, I gotta go. So he goes to explore. He finds some of the humans. A lot of the humans die, okay, in the crash and from the explosion. And so it's really just Amber and like 50 others left. And Morak finds Amber and he's like, you are ugly. I don't know if I like you, but I must tend to you because God told me to, with his flaming hand. So Morak, the lizard man, bonds with Amber and takes a leadership position amongst the humans that are left, and kind of helps them survive on his like pilgrimage to this very sacred temple where he thinks he will get a message from God. That's the best way I can explain this book. There's probably a better way of explaining it. I don't fucking know. So I want to be clear when I'm talking about this book. This is a very dark book. It has a lot of similarities to Ice Planet Barbarians, right? But tonally, it's more a little life, and it's written like the Left Hand of Darkness. It has a very similar kind of world building style, I guess. And like there's this general overtone of dreariness that I think there is also in the Left Hand of Darkness. And then I've never read A Little Life. I just know that it's fucking trauma porn, which I kind of think this book is too. This book is very serious. It is very dark. Okay, the way that I described it, it sounds silly, but really it's a book about religion and leadership and like understanding what you believe in and why you believe in that. And like, do you have the courage to question these beliefs if you are pressed? It's really a book about religion. There is romance, obviously, between Morak and Amber, and that is a very large central aspect. Like there's a lot of scenes dedicated to their romantic development. But I don't think it's not my favorite romance ever. I think they have there's good buildup, but Morak is never like, oh, he's my dream lizard man. You know what I mean? It's also just like so like cynical and again, dark. Like this is going to be kind of spoilery, but I really like have to get this out there. Okay. So again, there's like a group of 50 people that Morak is leading, which Amber is a part of. And Amber is constantly being fucking ragged on. Nobody fucking likes Amber. And the leader of the humans outside of Morak is this guy named Scott, who double hates Amber, okay? He fucking hates her. And he is dumb as rocks. He never makes a good decision in like the whole book, basically. And nobody in the group of 50 people, nobody thinks to question him outside of Amber. The whole fucking book, nobody questions him once. They say, hey man, that's interesting. And then they fucking do what he says. Even if they doubt him, okay? This is a book where like the other characters' flaws are heightened to really make our main characters seem more virtuous. Like, I think Amber's a good character, and she's a great protagonist. Both her and Morak are great protagonists. You read from both of their perspectives, and they're both so well written. They have such a tonal difference between their chapters. It's actually incredible. Like, this book is very well written, but like, they seem so virtuous compared to these other people. Like, what? Everybody is just so one-dimensionally evil. To what end? You know, to what end? There's a lot to like about this book. It's a very interesting world. It's a very interesting story. The characters are so strong. The main characters, okay? The main two characters are very strong. Every other character weak as balls, okay? They add basically nothing except to develop the main characters more. I think the romance was well developed, if nothing else. I don't think it was the best romance ever, again. And I think, again, this book is so well written. It is so fucking dark, though. Okay, there was like a whole chapter. It's a 700-page long book. I think it's too long. It's too long. It's too long, and there's parts where it just feels like the author's beating a fucking dead horse to make the story seem darker. I had to like skim a whole fucking chapter, a whole section, because it was just so fucking dark. I give that book 4 stars. I feel like I have very mixed feelings about it. It's such a strong book. And I highly recommend it if you feel that you are up to it, because again, it's very fucking dark. It's so fucking cynical, so fucking dark. Everyone is fucking evil except for Amber and Morak. And Morak's fucking evil too. But he's like less evil than everyone else. Anyway, last book I read in March was called Sainted. This one, going back to Jesse H. Rain, okay? This is another romance, enemies to lovers again. After the second one that I didn't like that much, you might wonder why I went back. I don't know. Sainted is a book about this very rich fellow named Damon who gets kidnapped for ransom. And while kidnapped, he is taken care of by one of the kidnappers who is just called Saint. And Damon is a kind of like, I wouldn't say arrogant, but he's kind of got an ego. He's very like, he wants to fuck with people, and then Saint is like a gruffer guy. There's always a gruff guy, you know? You gotta have one gruff person in every book. This book doesn't do much different from the other 2 enemies to lovers that Jesse H. Rain wrote that I read. The romance is fine. It has a lot of the same issues as the other ones have, where like the buffer between enemies and lovers is not enough, okay? Like, they just become lovers after having been enemies. It's a little better in this book, I guess, but I wouldn't say it was great. That's how I feel about that, okay? Like, if you're going to read an enemies to lovers romance by Jesse H. Rain, I would recommend reading Poetry on Ice, okay? Anyway, that's all the books that I read in March, okay? I'll see you all May. Bye.